We are just 2 hours away from President-elect Donald Trump's second stop of his post-election thank you tour, this time in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You never know what he might say, so stay tuned. Remember the big news he revealed during his rally in Cincinnati last week.
I don't want to tell you this because I want to save the suspense. We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. Keep it inside the room, but that's what we have, and he's our best. They say he's the closest thing to General George Patton that we have, and it's about time. It's about time.
Retired Marine General James Mattis will be joining the president-elect tonight and will formally be announced as Mr. Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense. That's according to the transition team. And Kimberly, earlier today I talked to some Senate staffers who said they believe that the waiver that is necessary for him to be able to get the confirmation, because it's not been 7 years since his retirement, that they think that's going to be able to sail through no problem.
Well, I hope so, because we need it to sail through. I think this is an excellent choice. I'm really looking forward to it. This is a name that was kind of bandied about before as a potential vice presidential pick as well. A lot of people in the military have tremendous respect for him. He's got a cool nickname, Mad Dog. We share that in common. And so I'm excited. I know I'm Mad Dog, and my boy is Road Dog. Isn't that funny? Yes, what my brother calls me. He doesn't even call me Kim, whatever. He calls me Mad Dog.
Is there a reason that we got the nickname?
No, like tough, cool.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
Get it
Julie,
done.
do you agree that
nothing to do with biting?
No, undefeated in sports.
You think the Democrats will go ahead and support the waiver?
I think some will. I think some have already said they won't. I hope they do. This is not a fight that I think they should pick. I think he's a reasonable choice.
Yeah.
Typically, the president does get his choice of nominees, except for extreme cases, and I can think of a few extreme cases where I wouldn't support the nominee, but this is not one that I think they should oppose. I understand you have the senator here from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, saying she's not going to do that, and a few others in the House, but the reality is
not that many.
Not that many, and I think they should.
Do you think that he'll announce any other nominees tonight?
I'm hoping John Huntsman gets named as Secretary of State. He's obviously not going to do it.
I think you've got a man
Oh
crush.
my God!
And Jeff, you're going crazy.
I mean, look, I had this brainstorm a couple of weeks ago, and then it turns out Huntsman talked to him the other day about possibly becoming the Secretary of State. And the more I think about it, the more I've looked into Huntsman's past. I've known him. His family has been in business, has been in the oil business, has been in the natural gas business, in the chemicals business for years, for decades. They have a massive cancer center out in Utah. But John Huntsman's a two-time governor, elected twice to probably one of the redder states in the country. Ambassador to China, speaks Mandarin. Guy knows business. Guy knows the world. I absolutely love this choice.
Are you taking credit for that brainstorm?
No, because I didn't tell anyone. I told some friends at dinner, but I just think that I'm just so happy when those.
There's a mind meld.
How's this? I know the campaign. The transition team watches this show. I'm just putting in my 2 cents that this would be an absolutely great pick. He brings everything that Romney would have brought, but without the never Trump part of the Romney nomination.
Do you have any comment on General Mattis and the Department of Defense before we move on?
Obviously, he should get the waiver, but forget about the waiver. They should change this law. It's from, I guess, 1947. It was 10 years, and they changed it to 7 years because they realized, I think they realized there was something wrong with the law. I think that the military is different now. The idea that you have to be out of uniform for 7 years, it seems like a crazy law. I mean, what is the reason for it? The idea that you want to be off the battlefield?
I mean, civilian control of the military has long been, I mean, that's the
7 years?
principle.
It seems a little long to me. I think they should change the law.
All right. Let's move on to something else, because we had President Obama today who was speaking about national security, and he's repeatedly claimed that al-Qaeda's leadership has been destroyed, but ISIS is waving victory flags in some places in the world. He did so again during his counterterrorism address at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa just moments ago.
Core al-Qaeda, the organization that hit us on 9/11, is a shadow of its former self. Its leadership has been decimated. The terrorist threat was never restricted to South Asia or to Afghanistan or Pakistan. Even as al-Qaeda has been decimated in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the threat from terrorists metastasized in other parts of the Middle East. And most dangerously, we saw the emergence of ISIL, the successor to al-Qaeda in Iraq. To say that we made progress is not to say that the job is done. We know that a deadly threat persists.
The president also warns against aggressive interrogation techniques, including waterboarding.
Staying true to our traditions as a nation of laws advances our security as well as our values. We prohibited torture everywhere, at all times, and that includes tactics like waterboarding. And at no time has anybody who has worked with me told me that doing so has cost us good intelligence. Despite all the political rhetoric about the need to strip terrorists of their rights, our interrogation teams have obtained valuable information from terrorists without resorting to torture.
Kimberly, this is probably one of his last addresses that he'll give on national security, and he's just going over some of that well-trod ground on waterboarding and trying to make... I actually think that he was trying to say, obviously, we didn't contain the terrorist threat because now you have ISIS to contend with.
Right. Okay. So, you know, President Obama was really not a big fan of the killer capture. He kind of loves the killing, to be honest with you, because he's the one that has ordered all these Predator drone strikes. No, he's not in favor of waterboarding, not keeping them alive. But the problem is when you don't utilize effective intelligence gathering techniques, you are then wasting an opportunity to be able to get intel and collect it to prevent future attacks. If you're just killing an information-rich source target like that, it dies with them. So you're not able then to continue forward to get other associates, other people that are working with them, other, you know, predictors about future terrorist attacks, and that's a problem. So we've actually lost, and if you talk to any of the intelligence officers, a lot of opportunities to be able to get that information. So I think they really need to take a focus back on that, and you'll see that with General Flynn and General Mattis, I believe, in terms of advising him about that to get back in the intelligence game.
Because, Eric, that is interesting because in 2013, President Obama gave speeches saying al-Qaeda's decimated, we're moving on, and that because that vacuum left in Iraq, you deal with ISIS, which is then metastasizing around the region.
And what he failed to mention, that what happens is, and these killers, these Islamic extremists, which he won't say, went from the Taliban to al-Qaeda, from al-Qaeda now to ISIS, and if you start to make some way into ISIS, they'll metastasize into something else in another region where you take your eye off the ball. It's very interesting to me, though, that you know, President Obama, he's against waterboarding. We know that, although he'll take the victory lap on killing bin Laden, even though the intelligence came from a waterboarding session that led to the courier that eventually got bin Laden.
That's a good point.
But he's more concerned with releasing these Gitmo terrorists than getting information out of them. It just blows my mind, and he wonders why they go from Taliban to al-Qaeda to ISIS. You have to get the intel. You have to do what it takes to get the intel and then kill them, call them what they are. A very interesting side note. General Mattis against waterboarding.
Well, I think that's interesting, Julie, is one of the things that Donald Trump has said, and I think Michael Flynn as well, that why do we keep announcing what we would do or not do? Just say we are a nation of laws. I believe that everything that was done in the Bush administration was lawful, but do you think that maybe there will be a different way to address terrorism, and given what Kimberly was saying is not just kill, but maybe kill and capture so that we can get the intel?
Maybe, but first and foremost, yes, General Mattis is now against, or has always been against waterboarding. Apparently Donald Trump, after a conversation with him, a brief conversation with him, is now also against waterboarding, he announced at Bedminster a couple of weeks ago when he met with him. But what I think is fascinating is, you know, Kimberly has a point about capturing these people and getting information from them, whether through waterboarding.
But there's other intelligence gathering techniques.
Right, or hopefully other means.
Effective.
What's interesting to me, though, is you have to put boots on the ground in order to do that. It's a lot easier to kill them from a drone and not put our soldiers in harm's way and on the ground. So we have to have an honest discussion. I've said this from day one. If we want to do that, we have to have an honest discussion with the American people. This will involve having many more troops on the ground in order to capture these people, because a drone can't capture them. And that's a discussion that I think President Obama, frankly, has been loath to have, and I think to some extent President-elect Trump has also been loath to have. It's an honest discussion we need to have about the appetite that people in this country may or may not have for putting more boots on the ground all over Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and now more and more potentially in places like Europe.
That's not the intelligence gathering faction. What you're going to do, you're going to have CIA officers, you're going to have special forces, special operators, SEALs,
capture them.
They are there already. They're all there. They're all there. They're there right now.
But I'm not sure to the extent that
So
you're
what are you
talking
going to
about
do
killing
with them,
them.
Jules? You're going to capture these killers on the battlefield,
like
you
the
bring them
regular
back to
troops.
Gitmo, and then do what?
You interrogate them. I just
No,
don't think...
but they don't want to do. So
But-
maybe Mattis has a different idea. Maybe Mattis will come in and say, all right, so we'll capture them, we'll bring them back to Gitmo, we won't close Gitmo, and we will enhance interrogate them. Okay, you don't want to waterboard them. There are many other methods of enhanced interrogation.
That's fine, as long as you don't have torture, I'm fine with that. But there's other ways to do it, and apparently Mattis doesn't believe that you need to torture somebody to get information out of them. Trump.
I feel like you could define torture in
everyone
any
has a
way,
different
right?
definition of torture.
I think waterboarding's
one thing he
pretty
didn't
clear.
talk about today were any of the attacks, such as Fort Hood, Chattanooga, San Bernardino,
Yes.
Orlando.
And the reason that we talk about waterboarding so much is because it is right on the line. Because you talk about defining torture, we don't torture, but right on the line was waterboarding. It's the most talked about thing. And how often did we do it? A couple of times, and we will not shut up about waterboarding. No one's going to do it. I mean, it's off the table. It's off the table, basically. But
I mean,
everyone,
We do it
now it's become a
We
way.
do it to our own troops. There's been more
Listen, I
U.S.
would-
soldiers and special forces guys and operators waterboarded than any of the enemy. You get that? Because in order to even be in those groups,
Exactly.
it's part of the training.
I'm with you, Kimberly. That's why, I mean, it's either do it or not. But we've talked about it so
Why
much.
talk about it?
It's a way to signal, you know, we're against torture, so
Yeah.
I'm against waterboarding. I mean, President Obama has never waterboarded, but he's never stopped talking about how he won't waterboard. It's ridiculous.
Which is torturing us in a whole other way. And there's other enhanced interrogation techniques that are so frightening, like caterpillars on shoulders if they're afraid of bugs.
Loud music.
Loud
Sleep
music.
deprivation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
Fingernails.
God forbid the open hand slap. I mean, that's just awful.
Those are- all
Those
right.
are the people, these people who are blowing up and killing Americans everywhere they can find one, or Westerners.